The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves as Maya Johnson stepped out of her apartment. She tightened the scarf around her neck and took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze against her face. Today wasn't just another day, it was special. For weeks she had been preparing for this moment. As a single mother juggling multiple jobs and raising her teenage son, life hadn't been easy, but Maya always found time to stand up for what mattered most: justice. Maya lived in a tight-knit neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. It was a place filled with laughter, shared meals, and stories passed down through generations. Yet it was also a community burdened by challenges: poverty, underfunded schools, and frequent encounters with police that often ended badly. These struggles weighed heavily on Maya, especially because she saw how they affected her son and his friends. They deserved better. Everyone did. Today there was a protest planned near the park, a peaceful demonstration calling for an end to police brutality. Flyers had been posted all over town, urging people to come together and demand change. Maya felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she walked toward the gathering spot. She carried a handmade sign that read, "Enough is enough." In bold letters, the words weren't just ink on cardboard, they were a cry from her heart. As she made her way through the streets, Maya noticed a patrol car parked near the corner store. Two officers sat inside sipping coffee and chatting casually. One of them glanced at her as she passed by. Their eyes met briefly, and Maya felt a flicker of unease. She couldn't explain why, but something about their presence made her stomach tighten. Still, she reminded herself not to let fear dictate her actions. Fear wouldn't stop her from fighting for her community. When she arrived at the park, the scene was already buzzing with energy. Dozens of people had gathered, holding signs, chanting slogans, and sharing stories. Some brought drums and tambourines, adding rhythm to the powerful chants echoing through the air. Maya joined the crowd, standing near the front with her sign held high. Her voice rang out clearly as she joined the chorus: "No justice, no peace." For a while, everything seemed perfect. The protest was peaceful, full of hope and determination. People of all ages and backgrounds stood side by side, united by a common goal. Maya felt proud to be part of something so meaningful. But then, things started to shift. A small group of counter-protesters appeared, shouting insults and trying to disrupt the event. Their voices clashed with the chants, creating a chaotic atmosphere. Maya watched as tensions rose, her grip tightening on her sign. She hoped the situation wouldn't escalate further, but deep down she knew trouble was brewing. Moments later, police officers arrived in larger numbers, forming a line between the two groups. They wore stern expressions, their hands resting on their belts as if ready for anything. Maya tried to stay calm, focusing on the message of the protest rather than the growing tension. When the officers began instructing everyone to disperse, she decided it was best to leave. After all, she didn't want to risk getting caught in the middle of a potential conflict. But as Maya turned to walk away, one officer approached her. He grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her back. Startled, she instinctively pulled away, saying firmly, "I'm not doing anything wrong. Let me go." Before she could react further, the unthinkable happened. With no warning, the officer raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The sound was sharp, cutting through the noise like a thunderclap. Maya staggered backward, her hand flying to her stinging cheek. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from the shock of what had just occurred. Bystanders gasped, some screaming in outrage. Others rushed forward, demanding answers and filming the incident on their phones. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Maya stood there, trembling, as the reality of what had happened sank in. This wasn't just an attack on her. It was an attack on her dignity, her humanity, and the very values she had come to fight for. And unbeknownst to anyone at the time, this slap would ignite a firestorm that would spread far beyond the confines of that park. Little did Maya know, her life, and the lives of countless others, was about to change forever. What began as a Simple morning routine had transformed into a pivotal moment in history, one that would challenge systems, spark movements, and force society to confront uncomfortable truths. The slap echoed like a gunshot, cutting through the chaos of the protest with a deafening clarity. Maya staggered back, her hand instinctively flying to her burning cheek. Her heart pounded in her chest as if it were trying to escape. For a moment, everything around her seemed to blur. The shouts, the cameras flashing, the crowd closing in. It all became background noise. All she could focus on was the sharp sting on her face and the overwhelming sense of disbelief. She had done nothing wrong. She hadn't provoked anyone. She wasn't resisting arrest or causing trouble. She was simply walking away when the officer grabbed her arm. And now this blatant act of violence, it felt surreal, like something out of a nightmare. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. The pain radiating from her cheek was proof enough. Around her, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people realized what had just happened. Some shouted angrily at the officer who had struck her, demanding an explanation. Others rushed forward, their phones held high, capturing every second of the unfolding scene. Within moments, dozens of videos were being recorded, each one documenting the same horrifying moment. A black woman, peacefully leaving a protest, slapped by a police officer in broad daylight. Maya's knees buckled under the weight of shock and humiliation. She sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but no words came out. Instead, she sat there, clutching her sign tightly in one hand while the other pressed against her throbbing cheek. Her mind raced with questions. Why? Why would someone do this? What had she done to deserve such treatment? The officer, Officer Daniels, seemed just as stunned by his own actions. He took a step back, his eyes wide with panic. His colleagues quickly moved in, pulling him aside as murmurs of disapproval spread among the crowd. Daniels stammered, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." But his apology sounded hollow, drowned out by the angry voices surrounding him. Bystanders weren't satisfied. "You think sorry fixes this?" one man yelled, pointing at Maya. "Look at her. You assaulted her in front of everyone." Another woman added, "This is why we're out here protesting, because of cops like you." The tension escalated rapidly, with protesters pressing closer to the officers demanding accountability. Amid the commotion, Maya remained on the ground, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. Anger bubbled inside her, mixing with sadness and confusion. She thought about her son, waiting for her at home. How would she explain this to him? What kind of world was she raising him in, where even stepping outside to advocate for justice could result in violence? These thoughts weighed heavily on her, making it hard to breathe. As the minutes dragged on, the situation grew increasingly volatile. Protesters refused to back down, insisting that Officer Daniels be arrested on the spot. Meanwhile, the other officers tried to restore order, their voices rising above the din. "Everyone calm down," one of them shouted. "We're handling this." But their attempts fell flat. No one believed them, not after witnessing what had just occurred. Eventually, reinforcements arrived, and the area was cordoned off. Officers began dispersing the crowd, though many refused to leave until they saw some form of action taken against Daniels. Maya, still sitting on the ground, was approached by a female officer who knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" the officer asked gently, her tone far removed from the hostility Maya had just experienced. Maya hesitated before nodding weakly. Physically, she was fine, or at least as fine as someone could be after being slapped in the face. Emotionally, however, she was shattered. The female officer helped her to her feet and guided her to a nearby bench. "Do you want us to call someone for you?" the officer asked. "A friend, family?" Maya shook her head. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. I need a minute." While Maya tried to collect herself, the videos of the incident were already spreading online. Social media platforms lit up with outrage as users shared footage of the slap, tagging influencers, activists, and news outlets. Hashtags like Justice for Maya and Stop Police Brutality began trending within hours. People from across the country, and even internationally, expressed their support for Maya, condemning the officer's actions and calling for immediate consequences. Back at the scene, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the energy remained charged. Protesters vowed to return the next day, promising to keep fighting until justice was served. As Maya finally stood up, leaning on her sign for support, she felt a strange mix of vulnerability and determination. She knew her life had changed, forever. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been mistreated, underestimated, or dismissed because of the color of their skin. Walking home that evening, Maya replayed the events in her mind over and over again. Each time the slap reverberated anew, a painful reminder of the work that still needed to be done. Yet despite the fear and anger swirling inside her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing. Something unstoppable. By the time she reached her apartment, the first wave of messages had begun pouring in. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers reached out to offer support. Some praised her courage, while others expressed their fury at what she had endured. Maya read each message carefully, her resolve strengthening with every word. She realized that this moment, this horrific, unjust moment, could become a catalyst for change. If she chose to stand up and speak out, her story might inspire others to do the same. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Maya made a decision. She wouldn't let this incident break her. Instead, she would use it as fuel to fight harder, louder, and more fiercely than ever before. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to turn pain into purpose, ready to make sure that what happened to her would never happen to anyone else again. The days following the incident were a blur for Maya. Every moment felt heavy, as though the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. She replayed the slap in her mind over and over again, the sting, the shock, the humiliation. It was hard to believe that something so small yet so violent could leave such a lasting mark. But it wasn't just the physical pain that lingered. It was the emotional toll. The betrayal she felt cut deeper than any slap ever could. When she woke up the morning after the protest, her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. Messages poured in from friends, family, and even strangers who had seen the video online. Some offered words of comfort, others expressed outrage, and many thanked her for standing strong despite everything. At first, Maya appreciated the support, but as the hours passed, the sheer volume of attention became overwhelming. She couldn't escape it. Everywhere she turned, people were talking about her. Her name, her face, her story, her teenage son. Marcus noticed the change immediately. Normally, mornings at their house were filled with laughter and playful banter as they prepared for the day ahead. But now the air felt tense. Marcus sat quietly at the kitchen table, watching his mom scroll through her phone with a distant look in her eyes. Finally, he spoke up. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice tinged with worry. Maya looked up, startled. She hadn't realized how long she'd been staring blankly at the screen. Forcing a smile, she nodded. "Yeah, baby, I'm fine." But Marcus wasn't convinced. He knew his mom well enough to see when something was wrong. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said firmly. "I saw the video too. That guy, he shouldn't have done that to you." His words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. Hearing her son say it out loud made the reality of what happened feel even more raw. She sighed and set her phone down, pulling him into a tight hug. "I know, sweetheart," she whispered. "And we're going to figure this out together. Okay?" Marcus hugged her back, but Maya could tell he was scared. Scared for her, scared for himself, scared of what the future might hold. It broke her heart to think that her son, at only 14 years old, already understood the harsh realities of living in a world where justice often seemed out of reach. As the day went on, the media frenzy intensified. News outlets picked up the story, running headlines like "Black Woman Slapped by Officer During Peaceful Protest" and "Outrage Grows Over Viral Video of Police Assault." Reporters camped outside Maya's apartment building, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or get an exclusive interview. Friends advised her not to speak to anyone until she consulted a lawyer, but the pressure to respond was relentless. Activists from across the city reached out, eager to amplify her voice and use her story as a rallying cry for reform. One group invited her to speak at a rally planned for later in the week. Another offered legal support, connecting her with attorneys who specialized in civil rights cases. While Maya appreciated the offers, she struggled to process everything happening around her. She hadn't asked for this kind of attention, and she certainly hadn't expected her life to spiral into chaos overnight. Meanwhile, the police department scrambled to contain the fallout. Officer Daniels, the man who had slapped Maya, issued a public apology through a statement released by his superiors. "I deeply regret my actions," he said. "It was never my intention to harm anyone. I hope Ms. Johnson can find it in her heart to forgive me." The apology did little to quell the growing anger among the public. Many dismissed it as insincere, accusing Daniels of trying to save face rather than taking full responsibility for his behavior. Others pointed out that apologies didn't erase the trauma Maya had endured or the systemic issues that allowed such incidents to happen in the first place. Calls for accountability grew louder, with protesters demanding Daniels be fired and criminally charged. Despite the mounting pressure, Maya found herself torn. On one hand, she wanted justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered at the hands of law enforcement. On the other hand, the constant scrutiny was exhausting. Cameras followed her everywhere she went, capturing her every move. Strangers approached her in grocery stores, offering condolences or asking for selfies. Even moments that should have been private, like picking Marcus up from school, turned into public spectacles. One evening, Maya confided in her best friend Tasha during a rare, quiet moment. They sat on the couch, sipping tea while soft jazz played in the background. "I don't know how much longer I can handle this," Maya admitted, her voice trembling. "Everyone keeps telling me I'm brave, but I don't feel brave. I feel broken." Tasha reached over and squeezed her hand. "You're human, Maya," she said gently. "No one expects you to have all the answers right now. What happened to you was wrong, plain and simple. You're allowed to feel hurt, angry, confused, all of it. But don't let them take your power away. This is your story, and you get to decide how it unfolds." Her words struck a chord with Maya. For the first time since the incident, she allowed herself to sit with her emotions instead of pushing them aside. She cried, vented, and even laughed as Tasha shared funny stories to lighten the mood. By the end of the night, Maya felt a tiny spark of strength reignite within her. Maybe she couldn't control what had happened to her, but she could control how she responded. The next morning, Maya decided to take a step back from the chaos. She turned off her phone, ignoring the barrage of messages and calls. Instead, she spent the day focusing on herself and Marcus. They cooked breakfast together, watched old movies, and played board games. For a few precious hours, it felt like things were almost normal again. But reality came crashing back the following day when she received a call from one of the lawyers representing her case. They informed her that charges had been filed against Officer Daniels, including assault and misconduct. While the news brought some relief, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was far from over. Filing charges was one thing. Ensuring real consequences and meaningful change was another. That night, as she tucked Marcus into bed, he looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mom, do you think things will get better?" he asked. Maya hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know, baby," she said honestly. "But I do know this. We have to keep fighting, not just for us, but for everyone who deserves to live in a world where they're treated fairly. And no matter what happens, we'll always have each other." Marcus smiled faintly, reassured by her words. As Maya kissed him goodnight and turned off the light, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to walk it with courage and grace. Whatever challenges lay in store, she would face them head-on, not just for herself, but for the countless others counting on her to stand up and speak out. The weeks leading up to the trial were a whirlwind of activity for Maya. Every day brought new developments, new challenges, and new emotions that she hadn't anticipated. What started as a personal tragedy had grown into something much bigger, a symbol of resistance, a rallying cry for justice, and a test case for accountability within law enforcement. The pressure was immense, but Maya knew she couldn't back down now. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been wronged by those sworn to protect them. Her days became a blur of meetings with lawyers, interviews with journalists, and strategy sessions with activists. At first, Maya struggled to keep up with the demands placed on her. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the constant attention made her feel exposed. Reporters hounded her for statements, while social media buzzed endlessly with hashtags like "Justice for Maya" and "No More Slaps." Supporters praised her bravery, but some criticized her decisions, questioning why she hadn't spoken out sooner or pushed harder for systemic change. It was exhausting, but Maya reminded herself why she was doing this, to ensure that no one else would have to endure what she had. One afternoon, Maya sat across from her attorney, Ms. Carter, in a small conference room at the law firm representing her pro bono. Ms. Carter was sharp, confident, and fiercely committed to the case. Her presence alone gave Maya a sense of reassurance during an otherwise overwhelming time. "Okay," Ms. Carter began, flipping through a stack of documents. "We've got a solid case against Officer Daniels. The video evidence is undeniable, and witness testimonies corroborate your account. But we need to prepare you for the courtroom. Trials can be unpredictable, and defense attorneys will try to poke holes in your story." Maya nodded, though her stomach churned at the thought of facing Daniels again. "I understand," she said quietly, "but I'm ready to tell my truth." Ms. Carter smiled warmly. "That's exactly what we need. Your truth. Just remember, stay calm and focused. Let the facts speak for themselves." Over the next few weeks, Maya worked tirelessly to prepare for the trial. She rehearsed her testimony until she could recite it in her sleep, practiced answering tough questions under pressure, and studied the legal proceedings to better understand what to expect. Despite her preparation, fear lingered in the back of her mind. What if the jury didn't believe her? What if Daniels walked away without facing any real consequences? These doubts haunted her, but she refused to let them consume her. On the Sioux morning of the trial, Maya woke up early, her heart pounding with anticipation. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that conveyed both strength and dignity, a navy blue blazer paired with slacks and a simple blouse. As she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her scarf, she whispered a prayer for courage. Today was the day she would confront not only Daniels but also the system that had allowed his actions to happen in the first place. When she arrived at the courthouse, the scene outside was chaotic. Protesters lined the streets, holding signs and chanting slogans like "Hold them accountable" and "Justice for all." Supporters gathered near the entrance, cheering as Maya walked past. Cameras flashed, capturing every step she took. Inside, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The courtroom was quiet, almost eerily so, with rows of spectators waiting anxiously for the proceedings to begin. As Maya took her seat alongside Ms. Carter, she scanned the room. To her left sat Daniels, his expression unreadable. He looked smaller somehow, less imposing than he had on the day of the incident. Beside him was his defense attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit who exuded confidence. On the other side of the aisle, Maya's family and friends filled the benches, their faces etched with determination. The judge entered, calling the court to order. Opening statements began, with both sides laying out their arguments. The prosecution painted Daniels as a reckless officer who had abused his power, while the defense argued that the slap was an isolated moment of frustration during a tense situation. Maya listened intently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Each word felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Finally, it was time for her to take the stand. As she rose from her seat, the room fell silent. Every eye was on her as she approached the witness box. She swore to tell the truth, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her body. "Ms. Johnson," the prosecutor began, "can you please describe what happened on the day of the incident?" Maya took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. I was leaving the protest peacefully when Officer Daniels grabbed my arm. I told him I wasn't doing anything wrong and tried to pull away. That's when he slapped me across the face. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on, recounting the events in vivid detail. She described the shock, the pain, and the humiliation she felt in that moment. She talked about how the incident had impacted her life, making it difficult to trust authority figures or feel safe in public spaces. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, determined to remain composed. The defense attorney cross-examined her next, his tone skeptical and probing. "Isn't it true," he asked, "that tensions were high at the protest? Could it be possible that Officer Daniels acted out of stress rather than malice?" Maya met his gaze squarely. "Stress is no excuse for violence," she replied firmly. "What he did was wrong regardless of the circumstances." Her answer drew murmurs of approval from the gallery, but the defense attorney wasn't done yet. He grilled her about her involvement in the protest, implying that she might have provoked Daniels somehow. Maya remained calm, addressing each question with clarity and conviction. By the time she stepped down from the stand, she felt drained but proud. She had faced her fears head-on and delivered her testimony with honesty and grace. Daniels took the stand later that day, his demeanor markedly different from earlier. Gone was the cocky arrogance Maya remembered. Instead, he appeared nervous, even remorseful. Under questioning, he admitted to slapping Maya but claimed it was unintentional, a split-second reaction to the chaos around him. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he said, his voice cracking. "I lost control of my emotions, and I deeply regret my actions. I hope Ms. Johnson can forgive me." His apology sounded sincere, but many in the courtroom weren't convinced. Maya watched him silently, her expression unreadable. Forgiveness wasn't something she was ready to offer, not yet, maybe not ever. What mattered most was ensuring that Daniels faced consequences for his actions. As the trial progressed, witnesses testified, evidence was presented, and closing arguments were delivered. Both sides made impassioned pleas to the jury, urging them to see the case from their perspective. When the judge finally dismissed the jury to deliberate, Maya felt a mix of relief and dread. The waiting game had begun. Back home that evening, Maya reflected on everything that had transpired. The trial had been emotionally draining, but it had also reinforced her resolve. No matter the outcome, she knew she had done everything in her power to seek justice. And whether or not Daniels was convicted, the fight for systemic change would continue. For Maya, this was just the beginning. The wait for the jury's verdict felt like an eternity. Each hour stretched into what seemed like days, and Maya found herself oscillating between hope and dread. She tried to distract herself by spending time with Marcus, baking cookies or organizing her small apartment, but her mind kept drifting back to the courtroom. What were the jurors thinking? Would they see through Daniels' apology and recognize the gravity of his actions? Or would they let him off the hook, chalking it up to a momentary lapse? Her anxiety grew with each passing day. Friends and family called constantly, offering words of encouragement, but their reassurances only reminded her of how high the stakes were. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about accountability, trust, and whether justice could prevail in a system that often favored those in power. Maya knew the verdict would send a message, not just to her community but to the entire nation. On the third day of deliberation, the judge announced that the jury had reached a decision. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she heard the news. She dressed quickly, choosing the same navy blue blazer she'd worn during her testimony. It had become symbolic of her strength and resilience. As she stood in front of the mirror, tying her scarf neatly around her neck, she whispered another prayer for courage. Today was the day everything would change, for better or worse. The courtroom was packed when Maya arrived. Supporters filled the benches behind her, their faces hopeful yet tense. Protesters outside held signs reading, "Justice is not optional," and "Accountability starts now." Reporters jostled for position near the entrance, eager to capture reactions once the verdict was read. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Everyone leaned forward slightly, as if bracing themselves for impact. When the judge entered and called the court to order, the room fell silent. The foreperson of the jury stood up, clutching a slip of paper in trembling hands. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the judge asked, "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The judge nodded. "Please proceed." The foreperson unfolded the paper and cleared her throat before reading aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Thomas Daniels, guilty of assault and misconduct." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. For a split second, there was complete silence. Then cheers erupted from the gallery. People hugged, cried, and clapped, their relief palpable. Maya sat frozen in her seat, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't dared to hope for this outcome, fearing disappointment might break her. But now, hearing the word guilty echoed through the room, she felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Relief, vindication, and even disbelief. Officer Daniels slumped in his chair, visibly shaken. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering something inaudible. Meanwhile, the prosecutor approached Maya, shaking her hand warmly. "You did it," he said softly. "This is a victory for everyone who believes in justice." As the judge sentenced Daniels to prison time and permanently barred him from law enforcement, Maya listened quietly. While the ruling brought satisfaction, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Daniels being held accountable was important, yes, but what about the countless others who had suffered at the hands of bad actors within the system? What about the policies and practices that allowed such abuses to occur in the first place? After the trial ended, reporters swarmed Maya outside the courthouse, shoving microphones in her face and firing questions rapidly. "How do you feel about the verdict?" one asked. "What message does this send to police departments across the country?" another pressed. Maya raised a hand to quiet them, her voice calm but firm. "I'm grateful for the jury's decision today," she began, pausing to gather her thoughts. "But let me be clear. This isn't just about one officer. It's about holding everyone accountable, the individuals who commit these acts and the systems that enable them. Justice shouldn't depend on viral videos or public pressure. Real change requires action beyond punishing one person, her." Words resonated deeply with the crowd, drawing applause and nods of agreement. Many supporters took to social media immediately, sharing clips of her statement and praising her eloquence. Activists hailed the verdict as a turning point, proof that sustained pressure could yield results. Yet amid the celebration, Maya remained grounded. She knew this victory came at a cost, not just to her personally, but to society as a whole. The fact that such a basic demand for justice had required so much effort was a sobering reminder of how far there was still to go. That evening, Maya returned home to find Marcus waiting for her, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, you did it," he exclaimed, throwing his arms around her. "Does this mean things will get better now?" Maya hugged him tightly, kissing the top of his head. "It means we're moving in the right direction, baby," she said softly. "But there's still a lot of work to do. We can't stop fighting until everyone feels safe and treated fairly." Marcus nodded solemnly, understanding more than most kids his age ever should. Together, they spent the rest of the evening celebrating. Quietly, ordering pizza, watching movies, and simply enjoying each other's company. For the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to relax, if only for a little while. Later that night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Maya reflected on everything that had happened. The trial had been emotionally exhausting, but it had also shown her the power of collective action. Thousands of people had rallied behind her cause, amplifying her voice and demanding accountability. Their support had carried her through some of her darkest moments, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Still, Maya couldn't ignore the toll the experience had taken on her. She had lost sleep, privacy, and peace of mind. Simple tasks like Grocery shopping or walking down the street had become fraught with anxiety, knowing that strangers might recognize her. Even though the trial was over, the spotlight wouldn't dim anytime soon. Every move she made would continue to be scrutinized, every decision dissected. It was a heavy burden to bear, but Maya accepted it willingly. If her story could inspire others to stand up and speak out, then it was worth it. The next morning, Maya woke up determined to keep pushing forward. She attended a press conference organized by local activists, where she reiterated the need for systemic reform. "This verdict is a step in the right direction," she told the audience, "but true justice requires more than punishment. It requires policy changes, training programs, and accountability measures that address the root causes of these issues." Her speech earned a standing ovation, further cementing her role as a leader in the movement for justice. Lawmakers began introducing new legislation aimed at increasing transparency and accountability in policing. Some proposed body cameras for all officers, while others advocated for independent oversight boards. These efforts gave Maya hope, though she remained cautious. Change didn't happen overnight, and she knew progress would require vigilance and persistence. In the days that followed, Maya received countless messages of gratitude and admiration. Strangers shared their own stories of injustice, thanking her for giving them the courage to speak up. Others offered advice, resources, or simply kind words of support. Reading these messages filled Maya with a sense of purpose. She realized that her fight wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating a world where no one had to endure what she had. One evening, as she scrolled through her inbox, Maya stumbled upon a letter from a young woman named Jasmine. "Thank you for showing me that my voice matters," Jasmine wrote. "Because of you, I'm starting a youth group in my neighborhood to talk about racial justice. You've inspired me to believe that we can make a difference." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she read the note. In that moment, she understood the true impact of her journey. It wasn't just about holding one officer accountable. It was about empowering others to take a stand. Her pain had sparked a fire, igniting a movement that extended far beyond her wildest dreams. And so Maya resolved to keep going no matter how hard the road ahead might be. She knew the fight for justice wasn't over, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Together, with the support of her community and allies around the world, she would continue to push for a future where equality and fairness weren't aspirations, they were realities.